playoff hockey best puck, the big Zamboni over at UnderdogFantasy.com. Again, use promo code. You can use, VAN, the Hockey Assist Network. You can use MSP, which most people use. But we have a really exciting playoffs ahead of us. I know a lot of people like to do their brackets. They like to do I've seen the pick one player per team type tournament set up, and those are great. They're fun, but they're just, you only get one. Some of times you can get into ones where you can make 2 or 3 player pools with one player per team, but it's just not quite the same as I think what Underdog's offering. I think this is probably the best form of playoff fun that you can have, and for big prizes. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. If you're brand new to best ball, I'm going to try to give you the simplest, easiest understanding as possible. I'm going to start off by saying this contest is $5, just to show you just how easy it is. The barrier to entry is $5. If you are, someone that maybe thinks $20 limit, that's fine. You make a couple lineups, make maybe 4 or 5 drafts, and just have some fun with it. But this is essentially a snake draft, just like any fantasy hockey, football, baseball, whatever you do. Is the same exact format. You're going to get in and be randomly assigned with 6 other people in a snake draft. So first pick is going to kick first in the first round and last in the second round, and go on from there. Now, I'm going to get into strategy, how to set up yourself for the most success in this, and then I'm going to do a live draft to run through exactly what this is going to look like for you. So again, I started off by saying, what is best puck, best ball, whatever you want to call it? Very simply, you're going to do your snake draft, and you're going to be picking with 6 people for that one specific league, okay? Your best roster will score for you no matter what. So in the first round of the playoffs, you're gonna have like maybe 3-4 centers depending on your build. You're gonna have 4 or 5 wingers depending on your build, 1 or 2 defensemen, potentially 3 if you're crazy, and 1 or 2 goalies. And your best one of each position will score points, and 2 flex from any of your centers, wingers, and defensemen. You don't have to do anything. There's no setting your lineups. There's no, adding, dropping, waivers, trades, none of that. Not with the playoffs, not with season long, never. You only draft, and then you just take what you get, right? So we're drafting a little bit early right now, but there is an edge to drafting early, as you may end up drafting a player like, let's say, McKinnon. I know the injury wasn't as bad as we thought, but what if McKinnon does go out and you get Kadri in the 3rd round or 4th round? One of those 2 spots, you may end up really benefiting for a guy that ends up later on going in the 1st round. So you'll get unique combinations as you draft throughout the process between now and when this contest closes, which I think is going to close by it filling before we have to worry about the playoffs getting there. We're already at 15%, as you see by the screen, and I'm going to get right into it. So again, a simple draft against 6 other people. If you win that league, you'll move forward. If you do not, that lineup's dead. That's why I'm going to end up having like 50 teams. Now, I want to go over, again, the playoffs are different than the regular season, because once a team is eliminated, all of those players are also done. They're not going to play anymore. You're not going to get points for them. It really adds a wrinkle to the system. When you're drafting for the season, you don't have to worry about that. I mean, obviously injuries could come up, but you can't predict that. No one is going to go into the year saying, oh, I'm not going to pick Matthews. He could get hurt. Like, never going to happen. But you might think, I don't like Toronto in the playoffs. Now, I'm going to give an, for anyone new to hockey, maybe, or anyone that is maybe just doesn't quite follow it at maybe the level I do. The hockey playoffs are crazy, random, chaotic. You really never know. There's been teams like the Washington Capitals who won the Cup after years and years of being, 2nd, 3rd, 4th place, always at the top team in the regular season, never making it out of the 2nd round, taking out Pittsburgh for the first time. Last year, we saw the Montreal Canadiens go from, a team that no one thought should make the playoffs to making it to the Cup final and finally losing. This year, they're like a bottom 3 team in the league. So trying to go into this with preconceived notions of, well, it has to be Colorado versus Florida, it has to be Carolina or Florida, that is going to get you in a lot of trouble. If you are drafting that way because you're building 1 or 2 teams, I understand, right? You have your 2 teams in mind. I think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, but I do understand the process in some capacity. If you're drafting at least 5 to 10 teams, you really, really, in my opinion, should not be setting your teams in sight before you start your draft. Now, again, if you pick first, you're going to take McKinnon, and at that point, you're going to have to make decisions whether you want to try to get pieces in Colorado together, because a lot of people are going to pick in between when you pick first and then when you pick again at 11 and 12. So, or what, 12 and 13, it doesn't matter. So you're going to have to, you might not get Rantanen. You probably shouldn't. You probably won't get maybe Landeskog, maybe. Kemper's might be your best hope, but Makar is gone. Rantanen's gone. Landeskog's probably gone. So yeah, you're really going to have to be building a unique team. And if you want to start taking pieces that McKinnon won't correlate with on 5-on-5 in the power play, it's going to get a little bit weird. So again, you're going to have to strategize, but depending on where you're picking, depending on how you've already built teams. I am starting to rename my teams by what the stacks are, and looking through and taking a mental note before I start saying, I have too much Edmonton. I have too much Toronto. I'm not saying those teams are inherently less likely to make the finals, even though they've been easy first round exits in the past. I'm saying that I just don't want to be overbooked on those teams. It's really easy to pick McDavid in the fourth round if he slips to you, right? It's like he's the best player in the world. But it does depend on the build. It does depend on the strategy. Now, the playoffs are not locked in at this point. But if you have the Score app, ESPN, NHL, you should pull up at least the bracket, what it looks like now, because divisions like the Atlantic, 1, 2, 3, it's not a stone cold lock, but you can pretty much infer that Florida is probably going to take the first spot in that division, meaning that they're going to almost definitely play the Capitals. That one is probably the one that's the closest to a mortal lock as you could get. The next team, Tampa Bay, is 8 points back on Florida. I think that's as of right now, it might even be 10. And the Capitals are 3 points out of the next wildcard spot, and Boston has 2 games in hand. So it really feels that way. So if you're drafting a ton of Florida, it might not be worth your while to get cute by taking, Ovechkin and Kuznetsov. I know that might be under-owned on the field, those kinds of stacks, because the team is very unlikely to go. On the other hand, if you have, maybe stacked up on Carolina, who's very likely going to win the Metro and end up not having a chance of facing Florida or, in theory, then the Capitals until the final round, it might make more sense to say, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take the Capitals as a big upset because you're going to get really, really good, how many teams are going to have Kuznetsov, Ovechkin, Karlsson stacks? Not many. If I've been doing these drafts, I'm on 12 or 13 now. I don't think I've seen it yet. It's going to be there. But if you luck out with that, elder Capitals team that gets healthy and maybe Vanacek catches fire in the playoffs like Carey Price did last year, you never know. The point I'm making is I do consider that a lot in my process because I know there's 3 Metro teams that are very likely going to be on one side of the bracket. And there's, you could debate between Toronto, Boston, and Tampa in some capacity for who's going to be on the opposite side of your Carolina, Rangers, Pittsburgh. But, there is going to be, a difference in those sides. And as I've already alluded to, as the rounds go on, players will get eliminated. So if you, let's say, for example, stack Tampa Bay, well, it's not going to make a lot of sense to get a ton of Florida on that one because they're almost definitely not going to be playing, they're going to definitely be playing each other in the first 2 rounds. So by the end of the divisional round, you've lost a stack already. So it makes more sense to try to get your stacks to the final 4 teams. The final 4 teams are likely going to be between that Florida, Tampa, Toronto, and Carolina, New York, Pittsburgh. Now, if I don't think it's wise to, if you already have mega stacked Florida, to take Shesterkin because now you're going to add a goalie that can't be there in the Cup Finals with you if you've already mega stacked Florida. If you're 5-6 players deep, which is a strategy that I don't think is wrong, but we're going to get into that in just a minute on that kind of a strategy in general, or at least my views on it, which are not going to agree with everyone. I know there's others in the community that may differ with me on it, but my point is that you should at least take a look at the bracket and understand what teams are likely to play each other within the first 2 rounds. And there's some matchups that are, like I already said, are pretty close to set in stone. LA and Edmonton, it would take quite a bit for that not to be a matchup in round 1. I would bet it's getting your 80 to 85% likely that that's going to be a round 1 matchup. So no one in LA is getting drafted. I think Drew Doughty is really getting overlooked in some capacity. Arvidsson as well. No one's taking any of them. So if you just don't get McDavid, it makes sense. Take him. There's no sense in saying that the freaking Edmonton, who has been, they're actually worse in points right now on the season than LA, couldn't possibly lose a series to the Kings. They love to lose in the playoffs. So again, I would take a look at the points, take a look at the standings, try to understand that first. I've given you a couple already here. Again, Minnesota, St. Louis. St. Louis is kind of, could them and Nashville could swap places. So that's really, really close. That could definitely go either way. But Minnesota likely, won't play Colorado in the first round. Colorado will almost definitely play either Vegas or Dallas. More than likely Dallas. Very statistically likely Dallas. So just keep that in mind as well if you're trying to get cute with a Dallas stack, or if you completely miss on Colorado. What does that look like? Because you're going to be playing against them. Now, another thing that's unique in hockey compared to football, and it's more like baseball, is that these are 7-game series. So, I don't think you can't take a player that's going to play one of your guys in the first rounds. I'm not saying you can't do it, because if you do get, let's say, for example, it doesn't really matter. Let's just say you do get a bunch of Colorado guys. They're probably going to play against Minnesota, let's say, for example, in the divisional round. If you get Kirill Kaprizov there and that goes for 7 games, that's really going to set you apart to get out of the second round and get to the third round. And if Colorado moves on, Kaprizov drops off, but he got you there, So I don't think you have to completely exile certain teams from your builds, but I definitely wouldn't get overweight on teams that are going to be in the same. If you have 3-4 guys from Florida, it's not going to make any sense to have 3-4 guys from Washington. That is more of the point in general. So I would definitely have these notes ready, available right in front of you, because you only get 30 seconds per pick, as you can see on the screen. Now I'm going to start kind of rolling through what the big Zamboni is in general. And then at the end, I'm going to go over my strategy and then give you a live draft. So 6 people size, 30-second per picks. Your max entries is 136. I'm just not going to get there. We'll see how many I end up with, but I don't think I'm going to get there. Might pull a little extra money out of the DraftKings and FanDuel that I've won and maybe move it over there, but let's not get crazy. Of course, it's very, very top heavy, but it's what it's all about, right? It's a GPP. This is not a cash game. It's a guaranteed grand prize, $4K to first place, $5 in the 4K. I think it's, if you make 50 lineups, you put 500 in. If you could get one to the finals, you're looking good. If you get, a whole handful of them to the second and third rounds, you're going to make some money back. As you can see here, like every team makes it through the first round. If you just do the simple math, actually every team that makes it top 2, I'm assuming then, pretty much is going to get their money back. So if you have 50 teams, you should have a number of them that move through the first round. You'll make a portion of it back. If you make it through the second round, again, you're going to just keep moving up. And as you get to the final, that's obviously where all the money's made. There's a chance that you could lose big money if a lot of things go wrong or out of your favor. But if you're smart and strategize, I think this video could help you, obviously, is why I'm making it. And you strategize correctly around this, I definitely think you'll be able to, if you make 50 teams, give yourself a chance that 10, 12% of them could move past the first 2 rounds and get to that big money if you do it right. Because I'm seeing a lot of teams that just aren't really doing it correctly. Again, so the first round is going to be just the first round of the playoffs. Every single team, all 16 of them, down to 8, down to 4, and finally down to the 2. So you might be thinking, well, why wouldn't I get super heavy on 2 teams? It works in football. We haven't seen basketball yet, so we'll see it in basketball soon. But it worked in football, right? But those are one and dones. That every team is going to play the same amount of games in football, and so like if the Bengals played the same amount of games in round 1 as the Bills, they then played the same amount of games in round 2. But that isn't going to be the case in hockey. So, I do think there's a bit more strategy that's going to be involved. I think most people are going to kind of keep it over on the Eastern Conference because I think most people think it should be a bit more competitive. It makes sense, but it's not necessarily going to happen. And I just don't want to have those preconceived notions in my head going into this, because I do think that having a mindset that you can outsmart what happens every single year in hockey is probably going to just get you into more trouble than it's worth. Fading Toronto because they haven't made it out of the first round in the past 1,000 years doesn't mean they won't do it this year. I'm not someone that believes in that. So just not taking Matthews and Marner and others when you fall right into your lap is just going to be a net negative, I think, on your overall roster construction. Because as we see, 6 for a goal, 4 for an assist, a half a point for power play point. On top of that, you just shouldn't be taking bottom of the barrel guys that don't have good rate stats, that don't, that aren't on the ice often to get the hits and the blocks. And, it's just, you need to prioritize that. And just to further get into exactly the skater points, it might be really beneficial to take defensemen that get good rate stats. I think it's going to be even more boosted in the regular season. It definitely was the case. Roman Josi teams moved on at a disproportionate rate. Both of my teams in the finals for the season long were Roman Josi teams because he is a difference maker on the point and has gotten an unbelievable amount of points because of it. They're going to block more shots. They're going to have more hits. Cale Makar is another just absolute different breed. I mean, this guy is out hitting Roman Josi, which is unexpected from him, but he's doing it this year. So you're getting a ton of points from your defense. So I wouldn't inherently pick a guy that is just like a Tyson Berry, for example. I haven't seen him picked often. Maybe some people get involved. He's so point dependent. If it does fall off, he might really, really be a dud. And if they take him off the top power play because he's so inept defensively, they just don't want to play him. Again, he could really kill your lineup because he's just not getting a ton of hits and blocks and shots. But we'll move over to goalie really quickly. Obviously, you just need him to win. I mean, the goals against you really can't predict for. I get it. Some people might try. They might say, hey, I think I can figure that out, but good luck. I'm definitely not going to be going down that path myself, but I guess you never know. Of course, Shesterkin and Saros, I think those are guys that if you're building stacks around the Rangers and stuff, sure. I think you almost have to have them in the mix. If you're saying that one of those randomer teams with a goalie that's unbelievable make it to the final, we saw it last year, so why not? We'll get to the roster construction. So you have 6 on the bench, 1 starting center, 1 winger, 1 goalie, 1 defenseman, 2 flex. So the bench is really going to be whatever you want it to be. Now, my strategy has been very 1 goalie dependent. I have some 1 defense. I have some 2 goalies. I have not gone over 2 goalies. Only 1 goalie is going to score. They're not going to ever be your flex. That just doesn't exist. So when you're drafting goalies, I do think it is a situation where I'm more than likely picking a team that I think is going to win the cup. They don't even have to technically win the cup, though. If the cup goes to game 7 and you have moved a full roster of 2 sides on and you have the goalie that doesn't win the cup, I don't think that means you lost. It could, but I don't know, man. That would be pretty crazy to think that, especially if it's a team like Colorado that makes it to the finals and you have, let's say, Pittsburgh and you have Jari and Colorado wins it in 6 or 7 games or whatever it is. I don't inherently think that is going to mean, because if you have Kemper, you're missing a lot of pieces on Colorado. But if you have Jari, you might have 4 or 5 pieces. And maybe you pick McKinnon early. I have a team right now that has Jari and, a full stack of Pittsburgh with McKinnon. And if that's the cup final, I might have a great chance because I have McKinnon with it. That's going to probably take up their McKinnon. And if they don't have enough pieces around him, I could get enough points out of the winger. So what I'm saying here is 1 goalie is a strategy I'm using quite often. I'm going to have a very good mixture of goalies involved. If you don't take a goalie until the last 3 or 4 rounds and you end up with a team like I had with Saros, it might be beneficial to grab another on the east side. You kind of have to pick your poison. Vanacek is a guy that you could consider if you've already taken Ovi and Carlson and stuff. But one of those worst teams, I think, is worthwhile to start getting to that point. And really, you should know by the time you are deeper in the draft. Bobrovsky doesn't last out of the 3rd or 4th round. Any of those top 4 being Carolina, Florida, Calgary, and Colorado. Those 4 goalies are gone by the 3rd or 4th round. So you're not really wondering. If you want to go absolutely galaxy brain and take a guy like Francois or a backup of any caliber, you could get crazy with it. I don't think that's going to be my strategy personally. I don't think it's going to be incredibly beneficial, but you really could luck out. And that's how you win 20K sometimes. So I'm not going to talk you completely off of it, but it's not a strategy I personally abide by. I also don't really abide by saying that I have to have a certain number of any position. Obviously, at least 1. And you have to have at least 1 in your stack that could make it to the cup final. You could even spread that into 2 teams which is what I'm doing with some of my lineups, where I'm saying I'm just going to, by the time you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th pick, I'm sort of starting to decide, okay, well, it's going to be these 2 teams, Team X versus Team Y. As long as I have enough pieces to get a center, winger, D, goalie, and 2 flex involved in this lineup, which might still come a little bit later, getting the last couple pieces, I don't mind taking a flyer on a guy that is not going to face him in the 1st, maybe 2nd round. That's a huge high rates guy, like a Roman Josi. right? It's thinking they can move past the first round. If I could get Roman Yossi in a build that just, again, won't probably see, like they probably won't. And it depends where they end up moving. But let's say they do jump the Blues. If you, and again, you have to kind of make these you have to infer this early on. But let's say they jump the Blues. Now they're not going to play Calgary, right? So I don't really mind taking a Roman Yossi and Forsberg because those guys could really propel you to the top in the first couple rounds if that team does move forward. And those are going to be the guys that carry them. I wouldn't get crazy with goalies like that. I have seen 3 goalie builds. I don't inherently think it's going to help you at all because you're taking 2 dead players in the first round. You're taking potentially now 2 dead players in the second round. Well, you are. You definitely are, whether they're in or out. It might be a new goalie, but 2 dead players again. I just don't think perpetuity that's going to be the best strategy. I also don't think it's going to be the best strategy with defense, unless if you have the stacks. Like if you take Makar early and you end up getting Roman Yossi, I mean, yeah, I can't fault you. It's going to be very unlikely they play in the first round. As I mentioned, it's almost definitely going to be Vegas or Dallas. So it kind of depends on where Nashville lands. I don't think it's a bad strategy. I've tried to get it. I've only got Makar once in my 12 draft because I just can't get a top 2 pick. But again, I don't think it's a bad idea to say those are your flex because they could really, really get the points to get you there. So I don't think it's, but I guess what I'm more of the point is when you stack a team like Minnesota, when you stack a team like the Blues or something of that nature, it's really hard to find a defenseman that makes a ton of sense. So I do think you want to get 2 or 3 defensemen in that mix, but you really want to specify or prioritize a top defenseman on the other side. So if you, any team, you really got to go all in and take a guy earlier than maybe you want. That could be Adam Box. That could be Letang. That could be really, those are probably the best 2. Maybe Carlson. I don't know if Carolina has anyone, but there's certain guys I definitely think you should prioritize in that sort of a mix. In the draft I actually did it before this video, just trying to keep my head in the game to make sure I didn't kind of say anything and contradict myself. I went with Tampa. I really prioritized Victor Hedman with it, and then I didn't really worry on the other side because Victor Hedman and Tampa, I had them going to the Cup. That kind of made it so I don't worry about defense anymore because if Victor Hedman makes it to the Stanley Cup Finals, I know Yossi might outscore him in round 1, but it's not going to be by a ton. So again, that's pretty much everything. If you go into all of the rules, well, I'm not going to do that right now because it's not going to transfer. You can kind of go over how many teams move forward each time. You can really just tell by the payout structure where it sort of goes. And you know what? We're not really worried about making $5. We're worried about making $4K. So again, my best advice, I've given a little bit of tidbits and strategy along the way. If you have a roster that has a tangible outcome of having a Stanley Cup final that fills every single position, you're in a good spot. You have a chance to win it all. I don't want to say that you need to, force it. Is the best way to put it. If you could get a really, really good deal on a player that is going to give you a chance to make it to the finals, you take that before you take your Martin Necas. You take that before you take your Arturi Lekkonens. You just don't have to do it because they might still be there, and B, they're kind of a dime a dozen. Like, I know that those players are maybe a bit more likely to be, quote unquote, optimal, but I don't know if it's like, in the cup with your stack, right? But you got to get there. And Marty Necas getting you there when he, kind of floats around between 15 minutes of ice time and he disappear at times, it's tough. And I do think, if it's your last pick in the draft and you fall right into it and your stack might need that last piece, if you got, maybe you got, Rantanen and Landeskog, you obviously missed out on the other 3. Your goalie's on the other side. It might make sense. You grab one of those players and hope that they, maybe get a hat trick game in the mix. There's a random guy that gets the hat trick and you give yourself that opportunity. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying it's wrong to do it. What I'm saying is if you're passing McDavid's, Draisaitl's, Ovechkin's just to take a guy like Arturi Lekkonen, you're probably going to end up not making it out of the first round. And you have to also consider if Colorado absolutely comes out and rolls a team in 4 games, if you overstacked on them, other teams are going to play 3 more games potentially more than them. That's a lot of time to make up the points. So the way I'm strategizing, the way I'm building lineups, it might not be the way everyone agrees in the community. I'm definitely planning and having more options, more guys in the mix that I think will get me to the finals, get me out of the first, second round, and propel me into a chance of making the big money. Now, I might move into the second round and not have enough players to fill my lineup, right? I can't predict a game seven. No one can. So, that's going to happen. And those teams might feel dead. But there might be a lot out there, and you might fall into the right bracket where you move to the finals with a team that is inherently kind of dead. Hey, you made a lot of money back. You didn't win it all, but you made money back. I'd rather put myself in a situation that gives me a chance that I feel like could actually get to that big show rather than say, well, if I'm in the big show, I can win it all, because I don't think a lot of teams are going to make it that are just absolute, two teams total. And what I mean by that is, if you decide Calgary, Florida, if you only have Calgary and Florida, that's it. This is your only two teams that you picked from at all. I just don't think those teams are going to move on. Maybe you get really lucky and one of those teams goes to game 7 every round. I don't know, man. You never know. Again, I don't think if you make 50 teams, you can't do it. I think if you make 50 teams, 60 teams, 70 teams, I think you can't afford to do it. But if you're making 5 teams, it's probably not the best strategy, in my opinion. And that being said, do what you think's best. Take the guys that get you. And my last little bit I want to talk about, and I kind of go over this before I start the draft, I just want to say that you should not go into any of these drafts. I'm going to enter one right now. I doubt it's full. Let's just do it. When you pull up the draft, you open it up, you just should not. Oh, yeah, waiting for 5 people. Perfect. You just shouldn't go in and say, all right, I'm taking Kucherov. I'm taking Landeskog. Don't go in and think that, because let's say you pick 3rd and you get McKinnon. You take McKinnon and you build from there. Let's say you pick 6th and you get Rantanen. Don't overthink this. Don't talk yourself into these are the teams before you get started. This is the ADP, right? This is where these players are potentially going, and where anyone that doesn't really want to, strategize too much once the picks kind of fall to you is going to start taking it. Anyone that's on auto pick. Every time I get into this, people are on auto pick. So that is where those guys are going to go. Once you get your first pick, let's say, for example, you pick dead last and you take Matthews. Well, now you're going to go down here and you're just going to queue up Mitchell Marner. Doesn't mean you're going to take him with your second pick, because, well, you take Matthews dead last, so you got the next one. Maybe you do decide to go with Markstrom, right? And you say, I'm going Calgary and I'm going Toronto. That's okay. I definitely think that's okay to do, but definitely plan. And also, if you take Matthews first, that doesn't mean you can't take, maybe Kucherov might peel us up, but that doesn't mean you can't take Jonathan Huberdeau, because they're likely not going to play each other until the conference finals. Maybe, you take that guy and say, well, Huberdeau is going to be one of the best players in the entire thing. I might as well get him now, rather than later on saying, oh man, I really need to get a little bit more action. I'll take Claude Giroux, right? It's like, oh yeah, got a guy in Florida now that could be there in that final, but it's not Huberdeau. And instead of taking Huberdeau, you took a goalie. Well, if you're already taking Toronto, maybe you just wait until Campbell. You say they're going to make it to the Cup, right? So I do think that there's a bit more to it than just saying these. I definitely don't think you have to say I'm taking Eastern Conference, Western Conference, Eastern. You do not need to do that. I've had drafts where I've had drafts where I've done 5 straight players in the Eastern Conference, 5 straight players in the Western Conference. We'll see if it works. And this is stuff, again, if you make enough teams, you're going to continue to learn, adapt, and adjust. I want to get you out of here. The draft's 20 minutes. 50 minutes was my limit on the video. We're almost to the 30-minute mark. I hope you enjoyed this. I will be right back after a quick break into the draft. So after that quick break, let's jump right in. $5 Zamboni draft. We're joining right now into the Underdog draft. It should hopefully fill pretty quickly, being as I told everyone on Twitter to jump in. We're waiting on one person, so this is going to move really, really fast, which I love, because it's going to get us going a lot quicker. Right now we're waiting for a pick. I tried to space this out so it would work perfectly, and hopefully it will. So we are just going to wait one more minute. So my early strategy when I'm kind of starting this in general is not to even queue anything. I really don't. I queue as I go. The reason for this being is that I don't know what my first pick's going to be. I don't know what my second pick's going to be. I won't know it until I have the order. So early on, I'm kind of thinking, and I know right now McKinnon is hurt, but he's still going to be my first overall pick. We kind of look at the injury thing. It's an upper body, could be a wrist injury, which definitely hurts him a little bit. But you know what? If I pick first, I'm just going to go with it. Now we're waiting for two people. Come on, people. I just told everyone to get in. Where is everyone? But yeah, so I don't really cue anything to start on purpose. I don't really think of any positions as like, this is what I'm going with. And I do that because well, I guess the best way to put it is, again, I am not afraid to draft 5 wingers in my first 5 rounds. I'm not afraid to draft a defenseman second overall in Cale Makar. I'm not afraid to do any of these things. So with all of that being said, I'm definitely going to do my best here to just get the best draft possible every time. I don't think you should go into this with any preconceived notions whatsoever, other than having a roster that will fit all the criteria. That is really the only thing you need to do. So we're waiting on one person again. Hopefully someone joins here very quickly to get us going. We're one short. But yeah, this is definitely something that is all about having, that one mindset. I think I need a roster that could fit a Stanley Cup final and fill all positions: a center, a winger, 2 flex, a defenseman, and a goalie. Now, is your flex going to come from defense often? Probably not. But as I mentioned, defense is actually a lot more valuable than people give it credit for in this space. I don't think that defensemen are going very high, or at least as high as they should be going. Pulling up the defenseman tab, I'm putting a pretty high premium on Makar, on Hedman. Yossi in general, I think I'm going to take a lot higher and more often than the field. Depending on the stack, I think it's really important that you can get one of these guys. It's really hard if you don't pick number 2 to take a guy like Cale Makar. If you get him at 3, I think that's really good value. If you get him at 4, you're doing really, really well. It reminds me a lot of in football drafting Travis Kelce. Cale Makar is that differentiation piece that gets you a lot further in a stack like Colorado that makes it to the Cup. Because if Colorado makes it to the Cup and you have Cale Makar with another couple winger pieces and maybe even the goalie and Kemper, that defenseman spot is going to probably outscore almost anyone else, unless if it's Tampa they're facing. I don't know if maybe Ekblad can be considered in that realm, but I really don't think there's any other defenseman outside of Yossi, of course, who definitely can, but Cale Makar and Yossi can't both make the Cup final. So you're really looking at a very unique defenseman that you're just not going to find in many other teams. So I do think he is incredibly valuable in these drafts, and I haven't gotten him yet, actually, in like my 10 drafts I've done. So yeah, I don't want to go too long here. If this doesn't fill soon, I might have to take a break. I can't believe this is taking so long. What is going on? How is this not full? My God. I had so many people that favorited the tweet. Waiting on one person. This stinks. I thought this would fill immediately. But yeah, that's some pre kind of stuff here. I don't want to stop it. All right, I'm going to pause it quickly until it gets full. Okay, we are full. We are back. And we're live. We're picking dead last. Amazing. So hopefully some of you in here in this draft, you'll see your names. Yeah, we're ready to go. I recognize a few of these names. I'm not positive on everyone, but I do think we got a really good unit here, and I'm excited to get going. So I'm picking dead last. I don't hate this position for one main reason. Picking first and last, you get the added benefit of having back-to-back picks, meaning that you can get the exact correlation that you want. So depending on who falls to me at 6, I can take, Kucherov and Stamkos if I want, or Kucherov and Vasilevsky. Just get started on a Tampa stack, something of that nature. It's unique in that respect. So I do think picking first and last are equally, well, picking first might be more valuable just because you get that, starting piece in McKinnon that might be really tough to beat. But then again, taking McKinnon means you're probably not going to get a lot of Colorado pieces, and they're really, really sought after. So that does make it a little more difficult to get a Colorado stack you feel really good about. Picking dead last is very valuable, and they're expecting you get back-to-back picks. So obviously in this spot, it does set me up for the potential of starting another Toronto stack, which I've done a few times. I might not do it for that reason, but that's me specific. That's not you. If this is your first draft and Austin Matthews gets to you at 6, I don't think you're doing yourself any favors by missing out on him, because if you're just going to put your boots in the ground and say I'm taking Austin Matthews in Toronto and it's going to get there, then there you go. You just sometimes you have to make these decisions. So we're 3 picks in. The first 3 go right in order. That's to be expected. I think a lot of times they're going to go 1, 2, 3. I think some people and really Rantanen should go 4. So this is where it's going to get interesting. We'll see what Paul does. Shout out to Paul, who thanks for joining. You gave it the last one in. Saw my tweet. Saw my cry for help. See what he does, but I might get a little bit different here, just because, as I mentioned, I don't want to have another Toronto stack. I already have 2 or 3. So I'm just probably not going to do that. Looks like he might time out. He went Aho. So I think I'm going to get started with a Tampa stack. I get back-to-back picks, meaning I can go Kucherov and Vasilevsky and just get started with Tampa. I don't like picking goalies early, but this means I'm not picking another goalie for the entire time. If you pick a goalie in the first 3 rounds, that probably should be your only goalie. And in this situation, what I've built is just forcing me into saying I am taking Tampa to the cup. This is the way I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to look at the playoffs and say, okay, well, what teams is Tampa not going to play? Hopefully, at the very least, I guess, until the second or third round. We can't be perfect on this early in the year. It isn't set in stone, but it's pretty close to the Eastern Conference, which definitely gives the Eastern Conference teams a bit of a boost. I think in general, there should be more offense and high scoring games and over 6.5s in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So I do think that it's going to be a little more valuable, but I'm really not trying to let myself fall into the trap of forgetting about the Western Conference, because you could get a lot of game 7s over there. I think it's going to be very, very competitive. I'm not going to fall into the trap of fading it completely. We do have the long wait, which is frustrating. We see a lot of Colorado going, and I'll try to pull up a couple teams here. This guy had Makar go 2, so then he took Landeskog. The other guy has McKinnon and Kadri, 2 guys that won't be on the ice together. But I'm kind of on the mindset as well that I'm not that concerned about that, because you are picking for the perpetuity of the playoffs. You're not picking for every single night. If Kadri has a hat trick and McKinnon has a hat trick in back-to-back games, you got them both. You're playing for 2 weeks at a time. So yeah, I like the correlation a little bit more, because you have maybe a bit of higher potential, especially in the final rounds when it gets really important. You got to get there though, and they play together on the power play. It's not like they can't get points together. So yeah, I'm totally fine with that. My picks coming up here, I might have a chance to snag Victor Hedman and really make this Tampa stack a really, really, really strong 3-man. 2 picks away. Neither of these guys have taken defenseman yet, so we could lose out on Victor Hedman. But as I mentioned, I'm going to be taking a defenseman early. That would be the guy, and we're going to see. So the truck goes, and yeah, we're going to get Victor Hedman here at the turn. I'm going to take a second before I pick him just to kind of get my other guy in mind. Do I go with Calgary? I think you know what? I'm going to go with Edmonton. Honestly, I know I have a ton of Edmonton already in my teams, but I don't care. I'm taking Connor McDavid. I don't have a center yet either. I guess what I'm getting at with this draft is I'd rather get a little bit different and weird with my Western Conference rather than taking the chalk. And I think that that's another thing that, I talked about in the prequel, that you can get different. You don't have to say, these are the best teams. I have to go with the best teams, because, you don't. You just simply don't have to do it. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting and kind of unique path, is to say, all right, fine, it's going to be Billy Cuso leading St. Louis and saying that that's the path. But if St. Louis makes it to the Cup, there aren't a ton of guys that might have peak performances. Like O'Reilly is probably not super duper optimal in the first few rounds. So you don't need to go overboard on them, but you do want a couple pieces, including probably Husso in that scenario. I'm just using them as an example here. I'm not saying I'm going to build that way, but I do want to make it clear that you can absolutely look into taking guys like McDavid and then having a lower tier team that you think could get there on the other side, in the other kind of form, group bracket that gets to the conference final. There's no rhyme or reason to if you put it, if you gave anyone that seriously models these kind of playoff series, if you gave them Colorado versus whatever team you want to say is the worst, Vegas, we'll say, the potential of Colorado winning a 7-game series is probably 72, 73%, which is really, really high, very likely. But it's still only 72 or 73%. There's a lot of variance there that another team could slip through. And we've seen it every year. One team takes that run. We've seen Ottawa do it in years that they absolutely had no reason making it as far as they have. We've seen it with the clear and cut obvious example of Montreal last year. So anyways, I'm pulling up the playoffs right now because I'm going to start to build around what I said. If Leon Draisaitl's there and Braden Point, those two are obviously the picks right now because we're already building around that narrative. We have 3 players in between. Someone I think will take Draisaitl here. I'd be pretty shocked. That guy was on auto pick. So obviously he was going to do it. If we could get Braden Point, we're going to be really, really happy with our Tampa stack. Paul already has 2 centers. I'd be kind of shocked. Yep, he goes with Kaprizov. So, we got to take Braden Point because this just makes our stack a little bit too perfect. Tampa Bay is very likely to be a 2 or 3 in the Atlantic, meaning Florida and Washington are probably out, but that definitely leaves Carolina, Boston, Pittsburgh, etc. So that's interesting of note to me. 12 seconds, 11 seconds. I think I'm going to go with Pastrnak because Boston also probably should not play them, or else they play them in the first game. But I'm going to go with them not playing them. And even if they do, Pastrnak is so good that he could be optimal enough to get me through that first round. I've already built a really strong start here with Tampa. So I'm going to go with Boston getting that wild card spot, which if we look right now, they are 2 points back of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's same amount of games played, so we'll see what happens there. But I'm just going to go with it. I think it's a good idea to think that they're going to be on the other side of the Eastern Conference. And after this, I'm definitely going to start looking a lot more West Conference Central because I've already sort of guaranteed Tampa in the Cup. Looking at my roster, we have Point, Kucherov, Hedman, and Vasilevsky. Tampa Bay's back-to-back Cup winners. This isn't a bad build or a bad thought process. I think they could get back there again. And I don't know if Stamkos is. He must have gone, right? How am I not seeing him? Stamkos. Yeah, Stamkos did go. So we don't have a chance at Stamkos. So I don't know if you need to pick another guy in Tampa at this point. We have a lot that we should probably get in the Western Conference. We have all the positions filled, and we have 2 flex to worry about. So maybe you look at a guy like Palat or one of those pieces as your last pick. But we're coming up on another pick right now, and I really want to get Western Conference kind of specific here. So we took McDavid, meaning that they're probably going to finish 2 or 3. I don't really want to take St. Louis or Calgary. I want to look at Colorado, Minnesota, Nashville, and Dallas. We already missed out on Roman Josi, so I'm going to look at a couple of those guys later. Toffoli's there, but I think I want to go with a bit higher upside. Let's pull up wing. We definitely want to go wing here. Let's take Fiala off the board first. If it'll let me, it will. Get a piece of Minnesota involved. I like that a lot because I do like Minnesota. Taking Dallas is going to be really, really contrarian. I know they're in the playoffs now. They should make it, but I don't feel super confident in it. So I am going to grab Marchand to go with that Boston stack to hopefully get to that conference final. I like the overs a bit more in the East. We're kind of hoping right now Boston versus Tampa in the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not going to take any more Boston at this point. If they end up playing Tampa in the first round, it's probably going to kill me or be really close to it. So I'm going to start looking in the Western Conference and building a little bit around McDavid. That'd be Evander Kane. I think that's going to be the guy for me. And load up on wingers. I don't think there's another center that I'm really too concerned with getting in my mix. Maybe Duchesne if I take Forsberg, but you don't have to. Sorelli actually might be interesting. That might be the guy, really. I'm gonna move him over as well. This is when I kind of start getting guys in the queue a bit. I should have been doing it earlier, but just hadn't quite yet. But this is when you really want to start doing this. Getting these guys in the queue, getting them ready, getting looking at what we want to do in the long run. Sorelli might be my last pick. You don't need to do it. We have Point here and McDavid, so I don't have to do it. You can also type. So if you do TB, For some reason, it only likes lowercase on the phone. I've noticed as well. So if you're typing on the phone, let's check it out here. Capital letters work on the computer, but when I do it on the phone, for some reason, it gets pissed at me. But I'll move Palat over as well. Kind of consider these two as my last pick. But my pick's coming up right now. Let's get back to the full gambit of players. Like I said, I do want to get. I did take Fiala, which is kind of a solo piece. I don't think you really need to stack him too much. But they stay away from Edmonton. I think I'm just going to go with Forsberg and Evander Kane with the next two picks. We're coming up on 10. I think it's, so we only have the one more turn to finish. So we have 4 guys left. I think getting these 2 wingers is going to be really, really smart way of doing things. So let's do it. Forsberg and Evander Kane. Now you might be asking, Forsberg, it seems a little early. They're playing against Minnesota, and that could be a problem because I took Fiala. But the way I kind of look at it is I want to move at least one of these guys on. And this isn't a perfect system. I do think you could definitely put your boot in the ground there and take Zuccarello and say, I don't care. They're just going to, they're going to beat Nashville. Who cares? But the way I'm kind of looking at it is if one of them can move on against Edmonton, who I'm going to get a couple pieces of in Tampa, just kind of have a full build. So like I'm saying, at this point, I took Evander Kane. So if we look at the cup of being Edmonton, Tampa, I have 1, 2, 3, what? So I have 1, 2, a utility defenseman goalie. So I really only need one more piece, and I'm going to, and I have Evander Kane. So I have everything full right now. I have a center, utility, winger, utility, defenseman, goalie. So I have the full gambit, just kind of getting a little bit more with it. I don't know if you need to go too overboard. That's kind of been my MO, at least at this point. If you end up with 8 guys on or let's say 8 guys in the cup, yeah, that definitely sets you apart. But not all 8 of those guys are going to score. Regardless, you got to get to the cup anyway. You got to get to that final. I'm making that point, and I might be wrong. And I said this in the prequel. Like, I'm going to do a lot of builds. I'm going to do different strategies. One strategy is going to be X, and one's going to be Y. Let's grab Palat first off. Like I said, and man, let's just take a look at defense too. You know what? Let's take Darnell Nurse. Let's just get that last piece with Edmonton. Look at those shots on goals, those hits, those blocks. He gets a lot of points. I think I'm going to do it. He could be a flex guy. He really could. I think he might be a flex guy over a Sorelli. Let's just do it. I'm going to do it. Let's get that full stack in there. We get the 3-man Edmonton, the 4-man Tampa, and the goalie from Tampa. So again, like I'm saying here, I'm going to have multiple strategies. This strategy is very much I got to get there build. I need to have the pieces, these really, really good players with some stacks like Pasternak and Marchand to get to the finals. And once I'm to the finals, if it doesn't work out perfectly, I'm screwed anyways. But the way I look at it is I've built something now that makes a lot of sense. If Edmonton can win against the LA Kings and then they can beat the Flames, well, now they're in the finals. If they're playing against either Minnesota or Nashville, I have another piece, just an extra building block. I have a couple guys on Boston going against my massive Tampa stack in the Eastern Conference Finals. Makes a lot of sense. Tampa beats Toronto. They find a way to get over Florida. I think everyone will say that could definitely happen. Boston, they're a wild card team, but they've been really, really good. Swayman's been awesome. So yeah, I'm kind of saying that those are the 4 teams in the conference final. If it's either Minnesota or Nashville, even if it is Colorado, I had no way of getting them in the mix here. And there's going to be a lot of teams that make it to the final that don't have Colorado. So we're complete. I have 9 entries. I'm going to end up having like 50. Let's pull up the team one last look here. We went with McDavid. Getting him at 19 was just too much value to pass up. He's going to be playing a lot of 5-on-5 with Evander Kane. And on the power play, Darnell Nurse doesn't quite get that power play run, but if he gets hot, he is a guy that if the points start to follow, he might end up being incredibly valuable in the playoffs. And he gets a lot of minutes now. Wait for the playoffs. What happens when he gets way more in the playoffs? So with all of that, I think that that's a really, really good stack that goes with Tampa. If Boston makes the cup against Edmonton, we do actually almost have no, we don't, because we don't. We wouldn't have a goalie. We're probably screwed, but it does at least give us, like I said, a 4, either one piece on that Western Conference side, either Fiala or Nashville. who play each other in the first round. And we're just kind of hoping, again, to make it through that first round with some guys that blow up with goals. And those are two guys in Fiala and Forsberg that definitely can, go for those hat trick games, can be those rate shooters and get us to the next level. I kind of regret the Fiala draft pick more than the Forsberg one. I kind of feel like I should have gone maybe with another piece of just a different stack. Maybe, Draisaitl was gone. I don't know. There could have been another piece there that maybe fit better. That I could have overlooked. It's hard to tell. And maybe, you know what? If I took Fiala, I just could have gone with a guy like Zuccarello. But Zuccarello, the reason I didn't take him, let's just say this quick, and then I'm going to close out. A guy like Zuccarello is kind of incredibly dependent on Kaprizov because Kaprizov is the guy on that line that's going to score a lot of the goals. If you take Zuccarello solo, he just isn't the best rate shooter in the world to where I think that he's going to inherently be super optimal. So, yeah, I definitely understand anyone that might say this was wrong. I think that there's definitely a narrative there for sure. But I'm buying with what I got here because I gave myself a path to get to, the final four teams with way more than enough pieces and a Stanley Cup final that makes a lot of sense. I know Edmonton is not going to be a super popular pick, but if Edmonton does make it against Tampa, my God, am I set up for an optimal team? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I gave you a lot of good advice and enjoyed the live draft. Thank you, and we will talk again soon. I can't wait to win the Zamboni.